Okay, welcome to week 7. Today we're going to cover week 6 and week 7. So we have 5 chapters to cover. Anybody know what we're going to cover today? What chapters we're going to cover? What information we're going to take a look at? Anybody? Has anybody looked at the PowerPoints for the last 2 weeks or any preparation? Okay.
We're going to cover chapter 25.
Yep, we're going to cover chapters 11 and 12 from week 6, which are chapter 11 is using health education in the community, and chapter 12 is community assessment and evaluation. And then we're going to cover week 7, chapter 25 is violence and human abuse. 26 is infectious disease prevention and control. And 27 is HIV, hepatitis, TB, and STDs. So that's what we're covering today. So as I've said before, if nobody's done any prep work, then all this information is going to be brand new to you. You should have received, hang on one second. This isn't one of my students. Just one second. Hey, Christina. Good morning. Christina?
I'm here. Sorry, I was muted.
No, that's okay. Are you Dr. Lundy's student?
I am, yes.
Yes, she is having class this morning.
Okay, so I need to go into her Zoom then?
Yes.
All right, thank you much. All right,
Okay,
thanks.
you're welcome. You bet. So this week, a few days ago, you should have received already the study guide for exam 3. Okay, so and along with that study guide we have already got our schedule together for reviews so that you have plenty of time to plan ahead. You have over a week and a half to plan ahead. I certainly hope everybody can try and prioritize attending at least one review session. As always, and it was very evident with exam 2. There's a direct correlation with attending live reviews and improved grades. Hey, while we're just talking here at the beginning, could everybody turn their camera on, please? I would appreciate it.
I'm driving. I can't turn my camera on, Miss Marvel.
Who's driving?
I'm Ebony. I'm driving. I'm taking my kids to school. I'll turn it on when I get back.
Okay.
This is Jamie Wilson. I'm driving, but I'm almost at my location, so I'll turn it on in 5 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Miss Marvel.
Yeah.
About the correlation, I do remember you asking like if everybody could put in their 2 cents, whether they attended the live or watched the videos or didn't do either. As far as that, was there somewhere to put that? Like I attended I don't attend the live sessions, but I do listen to the reviews. And I guess I'm talking personally, sorry, class, but I like to watch the reviews after solely because I can pause, stop, write my notes. Okay. So I don't know if anybody else agrees, but because I know you guys do take attendance in the live ones and I don't participate in them, but I do watch them.
I'm the same. I mean, I'll try to catch a live one if I can, but for me, it's mostly because when I'm not in school, I'm at work. But I do like to be able to pause and take notes.
Okay. Fair. Yep. Okay. I'm just making this isn't that statement isn't applicable to 100% of students, but the majority of students that attend live reviews have an improved grade.
I did 2 of the live reviews with 2 professors, and I was not able to catch your live review, Professor Marvel, but I can say that I did extremely better from my first exam. I feel like watching the live reviews help a lot.
They're very, they're usually very interactive, and students are hearing what other students' questions are, and everybody jumps in and participates that wants to. And I'm not saying the recordings aren't good. Live is always better, the best. Recordings, if you can get to the recordings, are they're fine too. I'm just making a statement that there is a direct correlation with attending live reviews and improving grades. So hence, that's why we sent out early your exam 3 study guide and the exam 3 review session. So hope to see all of you at one of the review sessions, or hope you can attend and plan ahead.
Also, can I add one thing?
You bet, Danielle, go ahead.
I will say too that I've just learned over the years from various things that I've done that if you will attend something and then within 24 hours, maybe attend another one and reinforce the material, your retention goes up by like 25% if you do it within 24 hours.
Excellent point.
So even if it's just like rewriting your notes, but if you can do 2 lives within 24 hours, your comprehension just goes way up, and your ability to remember it goes up a lot.
Yep. The reason why, thank you, Danielle, the reason why, and thank you, Lakeisha, for your feedback, and Salila, thank you. Salayla, thank you. The reason why, let's see, what was I just going to say? I lost my train of thought. It was off what Danielle just said. Oh, the reason why we offer we're trying to spread everything out to meet your needs and offer one on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. A lot of students work on the weekends. So we're offering you, trying to offer you a Thursday and a Friday. So I know everybody works. I know everybody's busy. I completely understand that. Having said that, it's up to you how you want to prioritize. It's up to you. You need to make the decision whether you want to prioritize attending a review, or if a recording's okay for you and you're doing fine with recordings, great. So just want to throw that out there. Okay, so one of the things that I would suggest you do after today's class is go to your study guide. And I pulled up, I'll show you, I pulled up the study guide for today. And let's see, where's the study guide? And I highlighted the sections that we're going to be covering today. Okay. I did this week 3 study guide last term, or a couple of terms ago. So I like it. It's worked well for the last 2 terms. But here's what we're covering: community assessment and evaluation. Okay. Using health information, violence and human abuse, infectious disease prevention and control, HIV infection, hepatitis, TB, and STDs. So those 5 highlighted sections.
While she's talking, I need to listen.
Those 5 sections are what we're covering today, and every other section that's not highlighted is covered next week. Next week's a big week. Next week is like 8 chapters. Okay, so anyway, if you have your study guide out, here are the sections we're covering today. So after today, you should be able to go back to your study guide and say, yeah, she covered that topic, or we discussed that. So that's how I like to work with study guides. Go back within, like Danielle said, go back within a short period of time, go through that study guide, those 5 sections, make sure you understand what's in there. If you don't, either come back to me or go to your book, go to your other resources, right? And then next week we'll cover the remaining ones. That's my suggestion. Does that help? And then next, since we've scheduled all these extra reviews and we have so much to cover next week with 8 chapters, I'm not taking the second hour to do a review, because we won't be able to cover all the chapters. And so since there are 4 live reviews, I'm expecting you to attend a live one or watch your recording to get a review for exam 3. Okay. And for the most part, this class did really well. Were you guys overall pleased with your grades for exam 2?
I
Yes, ma'am.
was. The recordings really helped.
Good, good. What did you do differently that helped? How
I
did you
attended all
prepare
the
differently?
recordings.
Pardon me?
I attended all of the recordings.
Okay. Who's just said that? Jamie.
Jamie Wilson.
Okay, great, Jamie. Good, good, good. Who else? What did you guys do differently to prepare?
I attended the live reviews, and during that time I was able to ask questions, and then I just used my study guide and went through it as we went through it during live reviews.
Elizabeth, that's you.
So
Who just said that? Elizabeth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Elizabeth, stay on after and we'll reschedule. Okay. Selena, go ahead.
I personally, what I did, because I prefer to go to the reviews, because again, like I said, I can control it and go at my own pace. But I went over the study guide by myself and made my own notes from the study guide, and then watched 2 reviews, and then took notes and added to my notes on the study guide with those reviews, which really helped. And like I think it was Danielle said, it really helped reinforce because I read it first. And so then the reviews really helped. And then I did the Kahoots. So it was just like, yeah.
Good, good. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else give us some tips on what you did differently to improve your grade? Overall, the grades were significantly higher with this class. So I was really proud of you guys. Really proud of you guys. There was one thing I was just going to say with regards to, shoot. What was I just going to say? It was with regards to preparing for the exam. I completed yesterday, last couple of days, I had to work on, they're called MidModule Assessments. Okay, they're halfway through. Since we're halfway through the term. They're similar, they're kind of a midterm evaluation for any students that are either below a 78% or have a lot of missing assignments or repeat students. So I'm in the process of sending them out this morning. I've already sent out several this morning to students. And so I'll get the rest of those out this morning. I've also sent a copy to your campus dean, and we'll be discussing those in the at-risk meetings we have this week that I have this week with your campus deans. So if you receive one, please respond. I asked you in the email to please respond that you've received it. If you want to talk about it, set up a meeting. So I just wanted to let you know, for students below a 78 at this point, you'll be receiving that. Okay. Okay. What other questions do we have before we get going? No questions? Remember, this is the week that your last group project is due. Just for clarification, if you've looked at the rubric, the last part of the rubric, it says peer review. Okay, that's for me. Okay, I'm assuming that your group is functioning well together, unless I hear from you and there are issues. Okay, if you have issues with a particular team member for whatever reasons, I'm not asking, what I'm asking is for feedback. Okay, so I have heard from a few people about issues going on in their group, and we've talked about that. So that peer part of the rubric is for me. Does that make sense? So there's nothing that, go ahead.
So what do we do with it? Do we do it individually and then send it to you? If your group is good, you don't have to do anything?
Yep. I expect to hear from groups if they're having issues with group dynamics and whatever. So does that help? Clarify that. Okay.
Yes, that's help.
I've
I
already
thought everybody had to do it, but that help a lot.
I should have clarified that. And then the last thing too, before I forget, is I sent out a whole bunch of times this week to meet if you want to review exam 2. Lots of people have responded. What I forgot to write in there, so far I'm okay, is that that's mountain time. So I should have put East Coast time in there. So I've already got back with everybody who scheduled a meeting and let them know that was mountain time. Was it okay? So going forward, if anybody else is still wanting to schedule a meeting, the times are listed in mountain. A lot of the time slots are taken. I think there's only 3 or 4 left. So I'll put that in an announcement today of what's left, at least for this week. And we can go into next week. It's no big deal. But a lot of people have already signed up to meet. So it's great. And I had several meetings yesterday. So it's great. So thanks for the prompt responses to that. Okay. All right, let's get going. I think what I'll do today is I think I will briefly review the PowerPoint for your chapter, and then we'll go into the book because there are, I'd say 3 or 4 important topics that support the concept that we need to know. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. What do I have? Chapter 11. Okay. Why do we think that health education is so important for groups in the community? Anybody?
Is it for primary prevention?
We want it to be primary prevention. A lot of times we're into secondary and tertiary, but we want it to be primary. But yes. Why? There's so many issues that go on in the community, so much education that needs to happen, because remember, in community, we're caring for clients across the entire lifespan, right? So health education may be with a new parent. Health education may be for an elderly client, right? So in this chapter, we're going to talk about how do people learn, identify the steps and principles that guide health education, describe the importance of literacy. One of the things we talk about in health education is the difference between literacy, health literacy, and health illiteracy in the promotion of health education, right? So what are some factors that influence group functioning and how members of the group learn about health behaviors? How do nurses work with groups to promote health, the health of individuals and communities, right? And what are some strategies that nurses can use to provide effective health education? So those are our objectives. That's what we need to take out of this chapter, okay? So take a look at your objectives and then let's go tackle how we can articulate these objectives, okay? So nurses provide information to enable clients to gain optimal health, prevent health problems, identify and treat health problems early, and minimize disability. It's a good summary of what we do for education, why we do education, right? There's 4 reasons: optimal health, prevent problems, identify and treat health problems early, and minimize disability. It's an excellent summary of why education is so important in the community. Well, in all your settings. Education allows the individuals to make informed health-related decisions, assume personal responsibility for their health, and cope effectively with alterations in their health. Okay, so we need to know this. Okay, Healthy People 2020 educational objectives are important to know. Okay, community-based education programs can often be used to meet and maintain many of these objectives. Right? Education objectives emphasize the importance of educating various populations. Okay, so these are general objectives, but they're also reiterating all the different groups that we potentially may be teaching in the community across the whole lifespan. Okay. So here's some typical steps in we'll cover this more in the book, but typical steps in developing a health education program. Okay, what does this look like? What is this? It's your ad pie, right? This is your ad pie, and we're articulating the ad pie with regards to developing a health education program. Remember, I've said all along, we need to be able to take your traditional ad pie and be able to articulate it differently with each different subject we're covering. So today, in this chapter, we're covering health education. So here's your ad pie. Doesn't have the exact same words, but can you see how that applies? Okay, so take a look at slide 5. Okay, slide 5 is an important one. Okay, there's a difference between education and learning, and between knowing and doing. Okay, we'll talk about that in the book. How do people learn? We're going to talk about that in the book. All right, people learn differently. I probably learn differently than you. You probably learn differently than your peers, right? How do we learn? What is it based on? Maybe what we already know, what we believe, the culture we're raised in, generational experiences, right? How well do we understand and relate to information we received? Here's our 3 education principles that we need to know, okay? Knowing the 3 education principles helps us to understand how education in the community is the concept of community education, right? So the 3 education principles are how do we learn? What's the educational process? And what are the skills that we need to have as effective educators? Okay, we'll cover this more in the book, but how do people learn? Slide 9 is important. We learn in 3 different ways. Okay, we can learn in a cognitive way, which is thinking. We can learn in an affective way, which is feeling. And we can learn in a psychomotor way, which is acting. Those are the 3, we call this the 3 domains of learning: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Okay, each domain has several specific behavioral components, and each level builds on the previous one. We'll go through that in the book. What is the educational process? Well, again, here's explaining your ad pie. Identify your needs, establish goals and objectives, select appropriate methods, implement your education plan, evaluate the educational process. This is your ad pie in the educational process. You guys with me?
Yes.
Gonna
Yes.
skip over that. How do we develop effective education programs? What's our message? What's our format? What's the environment? What experience are you trying to achieve? What's your expectations for participation? And how do you evaluate it? Educational issues, population considerations. We'll go through this. Pedagogy, andragogy. We'll go through the definitions of that in the book. And then barriers to learning. If you're going to be an effective educator, effective teacher in the community, working with populations across the lifespan, here's a whole bunch of barriers. If you're a you can read through this. These are all the things that need to be considered when you're doing education. Community nursing is primarily education. Okay, so there's a great list of your barriers. And how are you going to deal with each one? Okay, so these are barriers to becoming an effective teacher. Okay, and here's your low literacy and learner. So this one was the teacher related barriers. This is your students. What may be some barriers? Low literacy, health literacy. What if there's language barriers? Understanding different cultures. They may have very low health literacy. Okay, lack of motivation to learn. Okay, and here's 3 different models. I'll show you where they are in the book that are lack of motivation to learn. There are 3 models: health belief, trans-theoretical, and precaution adoption process model. They're all models of teaching that we can use with students that may have a lack of motivation to learn. Okay, and the use of technology in education. Okay. Criteria here's interesting with all the new information that we can get on the internet. Here's a good slide for assessing quality of health information on the internet. Right? Who's writing it? What's the content? Is it credible? Okay, so take a look at that. And then how do we evaluate the educational process? How do we evaluate the educator? What's the process for evaluation? Okay. How do we evaluate the education of the program you put on? How do we evaluate if there's, I don't know if you're doing an education program about caring for your diabetes. How do we evaluate the behavioral changes long-term? Okay. How do we working to effectively educate groups? Okay, have a look at that slide 20. Working in groups, effectively educating groups is part of understanding the concept of community education. And you can read through slide 20 and think about your own group, 2 group activities that you've done. Has this been present? Again, group concepts. A lot of times in the community, when you're teaching in group, you're teaching 2 groups. Okay. So let's jump to, I can't see. Nope, it's not what I wanted. I wanted that. Okay. Okay, so we're in chapter 11. We just briefly went through the outline. Here's your outline right here. Here's your PowerPoint outline. We just quickly went through these. Okay, here's your objectives, same as in your PowerPoint. Okay, so let's go through and see what we need to know. First off the bat is your Healthy People 2020. Okay, so far the reviews I've done, there have been some Healthy People 2020 questions missed. So remember, I'll reiterate this to you. When you're asked a Healthy People 2020 question, let's say you're asked, select all, apply, select what are the health education goals of Healthy People 2020. Okay, so any of these could be the correct answer. But if it's anything other than these 4, it's not a correct answer. It may sound good, but is it Healthy People 2020? That's what you need to focus on. Okay, so I suggested to one of the students last night to go back and reread the Healthy People 2020 boxes for the chapters we're covering. Okay, in case you get a question about them, put them on a learning card or an index card. All right, so I'm not going to read through all this. You can read through it. Okay, here's a difference between education and learning. Okay, I want you to read this paragraph here. Okay, the difference between education and learning is significant to understanding the concept of community education. You have to have an understanding of what education is and what learning is. Does anybody want to take a stab at the difference between education and learning? Let's read this right here. Education is an activity designed to help people change their knowledge, attitudes, skills. Sorry. Well, just highlighting it. Trying to highlight it, but it won't highlight. So education is an activity designed to help people change their knowledge, attitudes, and skills about a specific topic. Right? Knowledge is the least difficult area to change, followed by attitudes, and the most difficult is your behavior. Okay. Learning involves change, and change is difficult. So it's fine to be educated, right? I mean, but learning means that you take the knowledge and you make changes. Okay. People learn in many, many different ways. Okay. So here's our 3 domains, the nature of learning. Start on page 184. Okay. We talked about it. Cognitive thinking is thinking, affective is feeling, and psychomotor is acting. Those are your 3 domains. So you can go through each one and pull out what is an example of each one. So for example, cognitive includes memory recognition, understanding, reasoning, application, problem solving. Okay. Affective includes changes in attitudes and development and the development of values. And important to remember here with affective is it's difficult to change deeply rooted attitudes, beliefs, and interests and values. Does anybody know anybody that it's quite difficult to change attitudes, beliefs, values, irregardless of what information you're talking about? Anybody know anybody like that? I do. Right? It's difficult to change deeply rooted attitudes, belief, and interest and values. To make such changes, people need the support and encouragement from those around them. Okay. And then you have the psychomotor domain, which is skills, performance of skills that requires some degree of neuromuscular coordination. It's performing. Okay. One of the things we talk about in the psychomotor domain is that teach back method. Right? Clients are taught a variety of psychomotor skills, bathing infants, changing dressings, giving injections, measuring blood glucose levels. Right? And then we talk here, the next section is when you teach a skill, first show them how to do it. And then this is all about the teach back method. Okay, so that's where psychomotor, the teach back method comes into the psychomotor domain. And if you didn't prepare for today, you probably haven't done the case study. This is actually an excellent case study. Okay, and in the information I send you on Sundays, I send you the answers to the case studies. Okay, so have a look at that. Okay. Okay. We talked about box 11.1 was in your in the PowerPoint, in the outline. We need to know the steps. What are the steps of a needs assessment to be able to understand how to develop community education programs? 5 steps. This is your AdPie. All right, we want to identify what the client needs to know, collect data to obtain information about what might be the learning needs, the readiness to learn, the barriers. Then we analyze that data that we have collected, it, identify what's going to be the best learning domain, cognitive, affective, psychomotor. Think about what will increase the client's ability to motivate and learn. And then assisting the client for prioritizing learning needs. Okay, and this is important. Factors that can influence a person's learning needs and ability to learn. They include, have a read, there's a lot of them: demographic, physical, geographic, economic, psychosocial, social, spiritual. We need to also consider the learner's knowledge, skills, and motivation to learn, as far as resources available to support them. Right? When we're doing our educational programs, we need to think about resources that we're using, such as printed material, audio or visual materials, equipment, agencies, and other individuals. Barriers for the presenter may include lack of time, lack of skill, confidence, money, space, energy. Okay, but this paragraph is about how we're assessing the ability to learn. Okay, what if we have a group of hearing impaired? How are we going to teach them? How will we teach a group of hearing impaired? How will we do it differently? Maybe have a lot of visual materials. What if we're teaching a group of visually impaired? What might we do? Maybe have a lot of audio resources. If you're trying to teach kids in grammar school about the risks of obesity or eating well, that will look different than teaching a group of elderly patients healthy nutrition, correct? So there's lots of different factors to consider. Okay, here's our appropriate education methods. All right, so we want to choose a method that will facilitate the efficient and successful accomplishment of program goals and objectives. So have a look at this, page 186. How are we choosing appropriate educational methods? Whoops. Box 11.2, excellent teach mnemonic. Then this next paragraph under box 11.2 talks about how we choose educational methods. What do we consider? And here's where I just talked about persons who have hearing impairments or language limitations may need more visual materials. Okay, so you need to read through that. I can't read through everything I've highlighted. I'm just identifying the important parts of the chapter that we need to know to support understanding the concept of community education. Here's our levels of prevention. Okay, these levels of prevention are related to community education. Chapter recovering. So let's take a look at them. Primary prevention could be education at health fairs regarding immunizations for children, older adults, people with chronic illnesses, right? Secondary, education at health fairs, early diagnosis and treatment of diabetes, right? So what are we doing? Health screenings, right? The goal is shortening disease and duration and severity. So again, early identification, early intervention. Okay. And then, tertiary, right? Education and rehabilitation centers for adult daycare centers or adult daycare centers to help individuals who have had a stroke. So why is it tertiary? They've already had a stroke. And so we're going to have to help them learn how to maximize their functioning. One thing I want to mention about levels of prevention, I know we talk about education as primary, but also know that education can happen in tertiary. In fact, it needs to, right? So education in primary means you're educating towards prevention, right? You're trying to educate before anything happens. Well, in tertiary, let's think right here is somebody who's had a stroke or somebody who has diabetes. You're still teaching them how to take care of their diabetes, how to maximize their functioning after a stroke. So don't let that throw you off. Okay, education can also be in primary, tertiary, but for a different, totally different reason. Guys understand that? So, okay. You need to understand that. Okay, here's an excellent how to box for using plain language in health education. Okay, you don't need to memorize this, but I want you to read through it. Okay, or how do you organize your audience? How do you choose your words carefully? How do you make information easy to find? Those are the three main goals. And then there's a couple of bullet points under each to give you suggestions of how to accomplish that. Okay. Okay. We need to know the difference between pedagogy and andragogy. So that's important to know for understanding community education. Okay, so here's the difference between the two. Or does anybody know the difference between the two of them? Okay, so learning strategies for children and individuals with little knowledge about a health-related topic, that's considered pedagogy. All right, it's a model of learning in which, for example, let's say the teacher makes most of the decisions because there's little knowledge about the health-related topic. Right? So the teacher makes the decisions about what will be learned, how it will be learned, kind of like what I'm doing. Okay, since you guys don't have a lot of experience with this chapter and the information in it, I have to choose a different model because you don't have much knowledge about, I mean, you're learning now, but you haven't prepared. Right? Where andragogy, this is just the opposite. These are strategies for adults, older adults, and individuals with some health-related knowledge. Okay? So you, as the learner, influence what you need to know and what you want to know. Okay? So if you need more understanding of that, it's all explained right below it. So you guys can read through that. Okay, then the last thing we need to cover in the topic is different age groups and how they learn. Okay, so right here. Important to consider characteristics of learners that depend on the generation they belong. I don't know why my highlighter's not working. Okay, so we have three different generations that I want to talk about. Okay, we have Generation X. Well, we have the net generation. Okay, so people born after 1980 are considered the net generation. What do you think they're focused on? Digital media access to the internet, mobile devices, right? The internet group. Okay, and then we have Generation X. Okay, members were born between 1960 and 1980. Okay, how do they learn? They tend to be self-directed, like to work in teams. They need to develop skills because they're not as likely to be as tech savvy as the net generation. So you need to read through this and understand these three different, you have the net generation, all right, which I forgot to mention, they typically prefer to work in groups or teams, are active learners who seek innovation. And then they want immediate responses to their questions. And they're great multitaskers. Then you have your Generation X. Okay, and then the last one is the boomers, the baby boomers, who were born between 40 and 60. So you need to understand these three and how they learn differently. Baby boomers accustomed to being dependent on a teacher, want to be in charge of their own learning, respond positively to feedback, and want to do good at their job. Okay, so please take a look at this section of the book. I mean, why do we think why is it important to understand how each of these generations look at learning? Why is that important? Anybody?
So why they can properly be taught.
Yeah. So in planning your education for these different groups, are you going to have to think strategically about how they learn? What's the best way they learn? Yes, you are. Okay, and then you can go through these educative related barriers. We had it takes the whole slide in the PowerPoint and goes through each of them and explains them. So you can read through those. Okay. We talked about this. Two of the most important learner related barriers are low literacy and lack of motivation. Okay. Nurses often deal with individuals and populations who are illiterate or who have low literacy levels. And then we go through, there's a variety of health promotion models that can be used to structure health education and health promotion plans. So you need to put these on a card. It's important to understand these health promotion models for certain groups that may need help with motivation or may have issues with motivation. Okay, so there's 3 of them. Health belief model. It's an individual level model that can be used to plan programs if you think motivation of the learners is a concern. Okay. The second model, it's called TTM. Well, these 2 are grouped together. Trans-theoretical model and the precaution adoption process model. Okay, these are useful models in health promotion. Right, they're discussed together because they both deal with the change that occurs in stages over time. You don't need to know these stages, but you need to understand that there are selected models that you can choose from when you're structuring your education. Okay, so please have an understanding of what each of those are. I think that's all the important topics we need to cover for you to understand community education. Think of your groups you're working in now. I love box 11.5. It gives you examples of what your role might be in your group. You may have the role of follower, gatekeeper, leader, peacemaker, task specialist. Have a look at box 11.5. Important in group functioning and group dynamics. Okay. Core competencies for communication skills and educators. Nothing we need to memorize, but important. This is really actually important in any area of nursing you're working in, because you're always going to be educating. Doesn't matter where you're working. What's important to have? Excellent communication skills and your attitude. Okay. So that's all we need to know about chapter 11. I did pull up the case study. This is a good case study. Okay. Using health education in groups for the community. Okay. I don't think we're going to have time to go through this. If we're going to cover 4 other topics, we can come back to it. But I sent that to you on Sunday. Please use this. Okay. And again, why do I think that going through these case studies that I send you is important? Where's the learning coming from? Yes, it summarizes the information or does a case study about the information you covered, but What's important? What's really important in these case studies? Come on.
How to apply the information?
It's the rationales, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's up to you if you want to review them or not, but I do think that they are excellent additional tools for learning. Okay, the next topic we're going to cover is chapter 12, which is community assessment and evaluation. What did I do there? Sorry. Any questions about community education? Now we're going to do community assessment and evaluation. Okay. Let's go to our PowerPoint and see what we're going to be covering here. What are our objectives? Decide whether using nursing practice is community-oriented. Understand selected concepts to basic community-oriented nursing practice. Okay, what's a community? What's a community client? What's community health? And what's a partnership for health? Compare the nursing process to community-oriented nursing practice. What methods of assessment, intervention, evaluation are we going to use in certain situations? And how do we develop a community-oriented nursing care plan? Okay. So this chapter is going to cover community concepts and provides guidance for nursing practice with the community client. So this is all about community assessment. Okay. The community, what is a community? Okay, people and the relationships that emerge among them as they develop and use in some agencies and institutions and a physical environment. So basically, what is a community made up of? 3 things: people, place, and function. And what do each of those mean? Okay, obviously the people of the community, the residents, place is where it is, geographical, time, dimensions, functions. What are the aims and activities of a community? Is a community a college town? Is it an industrial town? Is it what are the main functions of the community? Okay. So how do we look at the community? Well, one way is to look at the community as a whole as their client. Okay, so does that make sense? So a community practice setting is insufficient reason for saying that practice is oriented towards it. This is a lot of wordy stuff. Community client. So when the location of the practice is in the community, that's fine, but you also may be focused on, I mean, we're talking about community as a whole, but within the community, you may have an individual. You may be working with an individual alone. You may be working with a family. You may be working with a certain group in the community, say pediatric population, elderly population. Okay, so when we look at the community, there are lots of groups in the community that we may be working with. We may be working with groups. We may be working with individuals, maybe families. That makes sense? I want to get to the chapter in this. Okay, so goals and means of community-oriented practice. Remember, do you guys remember from way back the difference between community-oriented practice and community-based practice? Can anybody tell me what that is? This chapter is focused on community-oriented practice. Okay, do you remember community-based nursing practice is you're already in the community working? with the population, with the sick population, right? And community oriented is you're trying to get oriented to the community. You're trying to learn about the community so that you can help them succeed and be as healthy as possible. You guys remember that way back? So this chapter focuses on community oriented. Okay. So the goal is the nurse and the community seek healthful change together. Okay. In community health, there's 3 common characteristics. We need to know these in order to understand the concept of how to do a community assessment. So what is the status, the structure, and the process of the community? And here they are right here in chapter 7 or slide 7. What's the status of the community? This involves physical, emotional, and social components. And there's an example of each. Okay, physical, emotional, and social components. How do we look at the structure of a community? Structure means what services and resources are available. And what's the process of how a community functions? Effective community functioning or problem solving. Right, so when we look at community health, we look at it from those 3 common characteristics: the status, the structure, and the process. And that's all summarized nicely for you on slide 7. Okay. From assessment to an evaluation, this is an excellent. Okay, so slides 9, 10, and 11 are your AdPi for this chapter. Okay, of how do you do a community assessment? How do you use your AdPi in assessing a community? These 3 slides go all the way from assessment to evaluation. Okay, one of the things that we need to know, and we'll go to it in the book, is the difference between data gathering and data generation. We'll go and get that in the book. And we need to know about data collection methods. We need to have an understanding of the AdPi through these 3 slides. Okay, but there's some specific aspects of each of these that are even more important to know, right? Because think about it. If you're doing a community assessment, you need data, right? Once you have your data, you can identify your issues, then you plan, then you implement whatever plan you have in place, and then you have to evaluate it. So these 3 slides are excellent to review for applying the nursing process to this new topic we're covering now in chapter 12, which is community assessment. You have to be able to apply your AdPi to all these different concepts and topics we're covering. So this is an excellent breakdown. Okay. And then this is also very important, personal safety and community practice. Okay. Please review this slide. Okay. All right. Personal safety is a prerequisite for effective community-oriented practice. Okay. It has to be your primary focus. Okay. Let's go tackle the okay. So just went through all that, your goals, your objectives. Let's go find okay. So we know that the nursing process from assessment through evaluation is used to promote community health, right? The process begins with community assessment, which is one of the core functions, okay? Which involves getting to know your community. So this page 204, this is an interesting read. This is, what is the community? What is the definition of a community? Nothing you need to memorize, but definitely have a look at this. Just gives you a good idea of how they define, how we define community. Okay. And then box 12.2 talks about different types of communities. Okay, this is a good box. You'll need to know this. It's important to understand what the dimensions of the community are. We talked about in the outline, the place, the people, and the function. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. The place, the people, and the function. Okay. So these are the three concepts of community detailed in this chart. So this is a good index card to be able to identify. You don't need to know everything in these boxes, but have an understanding of how do you determine the place in the community? How do you determine the people when you're doing your assessment? Think about this whole chapter as you're walking into a community, you've been asked to do a community assessment. How do you accomplish that? That's what this chapter is about. How do you evaluate? How do you evaluate the place where it is? How do you evaluate the people in the community? And how do you evaluate the function of the community? Okay. Okay. This is a list of 9 community systems that you're going to see in most every community. They're called system categories found within communities. Okay. It is important to have an understanding of what these 9, or understand these 9, that there are these 9, because that's part of your community assessment. So every community has politics and a government, safety and transportation, education, obviously the physical environment, recreation, economics, communication, health and social services, and religion and beliefs. Okay, you have to have a basic understanding of common community systems, and here it is. So if you had a question about that in the exam, what might the question be?
Select all of 5.
I know, but what would yes, and what would it be? Select all the system categories, community systems that you might find in a community. Okay, so have an understanding of that, please. Because it's important to understand what the common categories are that make up a community, irregardless of where your community is. Okay. Community health in terms of status or outcome is the most well-known and accepted approach. Okay. So we need to know that the status, in assessing the status of a community, it involves 3 parts: biological, emotional, and social. Okay. We just covered this in the outline, but you do need to have a look at this section. It starts on page 206. Okay. So this talks about hang on. We talked about this in the outline. Oh, community health is 3 common characteristics or dimensions. We call them status, structure, and process. Okay, this was in your PowerPoint. Goes through the status, okay, which is biological, emotional, and social. Okay, Then it goes through the structure. Okay, the structure was, what do you have for resources, services and resources? What's the structure of the community? And what's the process? Okay, the view of the community health as a process of effective community functioning or problem solving is well established. All right, are there groups in the community that support problem solving? Let's say there's a high crime rate or a low vaccination rate. Okay. And here's a nice summary of it right here, table 12.2. You know, if you're doing a community assessment, how do you gather the information of the status of the community, of the structure, and of the process? So have a look at box 12.2. Because you have to understand these 3 dimensions to be able to understand how to do a community assessment. Okay. Here's Healthy People 2020 for this topic. Okay, Healthy People 2020 provides the foundation for national health promotion and disease prevention strategy built on 4 goals. Okay, so this is regarding community assessment. Okay, so there's your Healthy People 4 goals for chapter 12. Community partnerships. Why are they important? We have active, you need to know the difference between an active partnership and a passive. Okay. Right. Community partnerships are necessary in the community. Right. Because the community partners have a vested interest in the success and the efforts to improve issues in their community. Okay. And here's your active and passive right here on page 209. Most changes must aim at improving community health through active partnerships between community residents and workers from a variety of disciplines. Okay, so like an active partnership would be what is having a direct impact in real time on the community. So an example of an active partnership would be a community that some part of the community that provides, the example we use is after school snacks in school or healthy after school snacks and after school programs for schools. That is real time having an impact and active partnership with that group in real time. Right, where passive is you're doing things in the background. Passive participation is the opposite, right? It involves maybe assessing, planning, implementing needs with community changes, such as the reduction of violence, the increase in immunizations, the decrease in childhood obesity, the decrease in suicides. There's a lot of work going on in the background to try and plan for changes. Does that make sense? So let's know the difference between an active and a passive partnership. Okay, because community partnerships are critical when you're doing your community assessment. And obviously a community that has lots of active participants that they can partner with is going to be more successful in accomplishing their goals, right? That they've set out after they do their community assessment. Okay. Okay, so this next section goes through an overview of the process from assessment to an evaluation. I'm going to have, this is the AdPie. Okay, this was those 3, I think, slides 9, 10, and 11. This is the extended version of 9, 10, and 11. And I really suggest you read through this. Okay. The assessment. And here's your data. Okay. Remember I said we should know the difference between data collection and data gathering. Here it is, page 211. And there's an obvious difference between data collection. I'm sorry, data collection and gathering, and then data generation. Okay, so that's the two. Right? Data gathering, you have to just gather it. It's already there. You just need to know where to find it. Right? Do you need to go to the public health department? Do you need to go to the vital statistics? Do you need to go? It's already there. You just need to gather it. And then data generation, obviously, is you need to generate data. How do we do that? This is information that doesn't exist yet. Right? This may be interviews. Right? Well, here's some examples. Okay, how are you going to generate some data? Talk to people about communities' knowledge and beliefs. What are their values? What are the norms in the community? What's the power structure? What's the leadership of the community? Okay, again, assume you're walking into a community that you know nothing about, and you're asked to do a full community assessment. Well, part of the assessment is data collection and interpretation. Okay. Here's some data collection methods, right? Interviews, observations, windshield surveys. Okay. Table 12.3 is an excellent summary of windshield survey guidelines. Okay, it's excellent. And again, this is still the whole process of assessment. We're still in assessment. Okay. So I want you to have a read through that. After reading through this whole section of assessment through evaluation, if you still have questions, please let me know. But I do want you guys to review that on your own. Okay. Here's your goals and objectives. It goes through each. Okay, this is a section I want you to read as well, page 217, personal safety and community practice. That was the last slide. Okay, we must understand why personal safety and community practice is a priority. Okay, that's part of our community assessment. All right, so page 217, the section of personal safety and the community practice. I mean, think about all the things that can happen if you're out in the community doing assessments. I mean, why does personal safety need to be a priority? And who can help you with assessing the community? Maybe law enforcement can help you. Here's the areas to, maybe take a buddy with you. I mean, who can you reach out to in the community when you're trying to come up with your personal safety plan when you're working in the community? Maybe other nurses, social workers, healthcare providers who are familiar with the dynamics of a community. You have to be able to reach out. Community members. The best source of information about the community are community members themselves. Right? And one benefit of developing an active partnership with the community members is their willingness to share their insight about day-to-day life. Okay. Here's an excellent checklist for community assessment. You don't need to know this, but just sharing that it's out there and it's excellent. Okay. Again, there is a great case study for community assessment evaluation. Okay. Rationales here include windshield survey. Excellent. How to collect data. That's a rationale. And this is important. Question 3 rationale is important. Okay. I want you to go through the case study, but if you only get to the rationales, I'm fine with that. Gaining entry or acceptance into a community is perhaps the biggest challenge in doing your assessment, right? The nurse is usually considered the outsider and often represents an established healthcare system that is neither known nor trusted by the community members, who may therefore react with indifference or maybe even act hostilely towards a nurse, right? In addition, nurses may feel insecure about their skills as a community worker, and the community may refuse to acknowledge its needs for those skills. Okay, because the nurse's success depends largely on the way he or she is viewed, entry into the community is critical. Make sense? Okay, let me make sure I covered everything I wanted to. Okay. Okay, that's it for community assessment. We're moving on to this week's. We're covering 25, 26, 27. Any questions about what we just went through? Okay, here's what we're covering now. Violence and human abuse. It's 25, 26, infectious disease prevention and control, and then HIV, hepatitis, TB, and STDs. Okay, so let's start with violence and human abuse. Tough, tough, tough topic. Okay. Actually, let's watch this real quick. Can you guys still see my screen? I haven't done this before, so I'm gonna. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Anybody?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Can you hear this?
No.
No.
Okay, you guys can't hear that when I put on the. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to send. Okay, I'm going to send that to you. You couldn't hear when I clicked the arrow to go on, you couldn't hear that? Huh. Okay. Okay, I will send that. I will send that to you because these are 3 excellent little short videos about each of these chapters. Okay, so let's talk about violence and human abuse. Okay, you can read through these objectives. Well, we can read through these objectives, right? We need to be able to discuss and articulate the scope of the problem of violence in communities, describe at least 3 factors in most communities that encourage violence and human abuse. Identify common predictors of potential child abuse and indicators of its presence. We need to be able to articulate 4 general types of child abuse. What are they? Neglect, physical, emotional, and sexual. What are the dynamics and signs of female abuse by male partners? Elder abuse. What's our role in working with survivors? What's forensic nursing and its relationship to public health nursing? Okay, what do we know about violence? We know that there's a significant mortality and morbidity result, right? Nurses, we care for the victims, the perpetrators, and those who witness physical and psychological violence. Doesn't matter where you work. You're going to be working with victims of violence in any area of nursing you're working with. Emergency room, urgent care, community, patients in the hospital, right? Nurses also, we can also take an active role in developing community responses to violence, working on public policy and needed resources. Hey, are there enough shelters in your community for pregnant moms who have been abused? So nurses are involved with assessing what community resources you have to meet the needs of what issues are going on in your community. What are some social and community factors influencing violence? Work, education, media, organized religion, population, community facilities. Think of all these areas and the violence that's happened within these areas: workplace violence, school shootings, religious attacks on religious places of worship, just mass shootings, mass population, things that happen out in the community, and then community facilities. It seems like violence is everywhere right now, everywhere. Right? Social and work community factors, maybe what's going on. You know, work can be fulfilling and contribute to a sense of well-being, but it can also be frustrating and unfulfilling. Can contribute to stress, lead to aggression and violence in the workplace. Right? May contribute to violent behavior. Sometimes workers have a difficulty separating feelings generated at work and those at home. What if they don't get the promotion they wanted? What if they didn't get the salary increase they wanted? I mean, from what you read about today, it doesn't take much to set off people. Everybody's so on edge about everything, right? And then schools, right? School violence, school shootings, bullying, harassment. How has the media contributed? Programs and printed articles can inform and increase public awareness about family violence, right? I mean, think of all the violence you see when you watch TV, right? So media can indirectly lead people to choose violence. Organized religion, how does that contribute? Right? Religion generally teaches nonviolent conflict resolution. However, we see what's happening with violence against certain religious cores. Okay, community, right? A community structure can influence the potential for violence. Let's say you live in the inner city in very crowded conditions. Much higher risk for aggression and anger and tension, which increases the risk of violence. You know, lack of job. What if you live in a community that has lack of jobs, low paying jobs, can lead to feelings of inadequacy, despair, and social alienation. And then in communities, you also have to talk about gangs. Okay, we know that in some communities are more desirable to live and work than others. Raise families, right? Have all these additional resources that can reduce the potential for crime and violence. That's great, right? Communities that have pools, playgrounds, parks, sports, are acceptable outlets, for a variety of feelings, including aggression. So the more resources a community has, the better, the less risk of violence. Think about the communities that don't have all that. And here's a couple of definitions of violence against individuals or oneself. What is a homicide? What is an assault? What is sexual violence? And suicide? Family violence and abuse is a huge community issue. Okay. You can read through this. And some nursing interventions. How do we identify potential victims of family abuse? Right? We're going to see, I just said a little bit earlier, we're going to see clients in a variety of settings, schools, businesses, homes, clinics. I'd add, where else? Hospitals. Where else might we see potential victims of family abuse? Homeless shelters, safe houses. Where else might we see, I'm asking you guys this, potential victims of family abuse? Anybody? Okay. Okay. Here's your definition of violence. Here's your Healthy People 2020. Okay, this is on page 434. Okay, this is their objectives for reducing violence. Okay. These are important. This box is important to know for ways we're going to try and reduce violence in our communities. Okay. We just went through all of this. Social and community factors influencing violence. So if you need to have a better understanding of the social and community factors, you can come here and read this. We talked about the work. We talked about workplace. We talked about schools, the media's role, religion, population, community facilities. Okay. Here's your definitions of violence. What is a homicide? Was an assault, sexual violence, or rape? And suicide. Okay. Family violence and abuse. What is family violence? Okay. We just went through that in the outline, but here's a much more detailed version of what is family violence and abuse. Okay. Family violence can include sexual, emotional, physical abuse, and can potentially cause significant injury and death. Okay. Development of abusive patterns. We need to be able to articulate, be able to, as a nurse, be able to identify patterns of abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. Box 25.1 talks about abuse being about power and control. We need to be, as nurses, we need to be able to recognize this because we are going to face and take care of patients, clients that are either perpetrators of abuse, victims of abuse, witnessing abuse. Box 25.2, determining the risk factors for child abuse. Nothing to memorize, but very important information. How do you identify potentially abusive parents? Maybe in the emergency room or maybe in schools. Just one part of the, so hang on. Signs of abuse. And look at the list. Physical, hitting, kicking, punching. They go through physical abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse. But these are all the signs of abuse. And then pregnancy. You know, how do you assess for intimate partner violence? Battering during pregnancy has serious implications for the health of the woman and potentially the baby, and if there's other children in the house. And then elder abuse. We can't avoid talking about elder abuse. It is a form of family violence. Okay. All right. Like spouse abuse, child abuse, most cases of elder abuse go unreported because the elderly person is afraid to tell anybody. I would like for you to read through this section. Abuse of older adults, starting on page 445. Okay. Older adults are physically abused, emotionally abused, financially abused, and even sexually abused. But elder abuse is a huge concern. Huge concern. And here's a nice little box with a summary of how to potentially identify older abuse. Right? Financial abuse, depression, unexplained physical injuries, poor nutrition. Okay. Okay, so what can we do? This is what I wanted to get to. What can we do? So 448, we have to have an understanding of nursing interventions. All right, so we know that primary prevention begins with a community approach. Okay, it incorporates strategies. Look at all the different areas we want to get input from. Okay, criminal justice, education, social services, community advocacy, and public health to prevent violence. Okay, you have to pull all these people, groups, strategies together if you're going to come up with an effective strategies for reducing violence. Okay, primary prevention, right? So we know that primary prevention begins with a community approach. Okay, and here's some strategies that communities have used. Okay, please put this on a index card. Okay, what kind of question on an exam might you get about this? Maybe what would be some primary prevention strategies that will help reduce violence in communities? Okay. School, and these are all examples. School-based curriculum that teaches children and youth how to cope with anger, stress, and frustration. Teach them communication and meditation skills. Family programs that teach parents how to deal with their children more effectively. Preschool programs that develop intellectual and social skills. And so on. So you have to be able to identify or recognize what are some primary prevention examples of community, kind of a community organized approach, including all these groups: criminal justice, education, social services, community, advocacy, and public health. when you pull all these groups together to talk about primary prevention in reducing violence, here's a short list of what's been used. Make sense? Okay, that's all we're going to cover in that chapter. But I wanted to show you again, these rationales in these case studies are excellent. This rationale talks about youth violence, bullying. Okay, so I need you to read these rationales. They're important in understanding violence in the communities. So this is an excellent rationale. Here's what we just did right here. Here's exactly what we just did. Okay. So question 2's rationale is exactly what we just went over. Okay. And then here's a whole rationale about how to reduce your vulnerability to violence. Okay. So this is a excellent case study. Okay. So that's the chapter of violence and human abuse. Any questions? Okay. Chapter 26 is infectious disease prevention and control. I'm going to start going through this a little bit faster because we still have 2 chapters to cover. But again, all this information is new to you guys, so it's probably a lot of information today. So I'm going to skip through here. Okay, we know we have worldwide concerns about infectious diseases, right? We know they've increased with the growth of the population and certainly the migration of the population. As people move from one place to another, they bring their diseases, they bring their levels of immunity and their resistance to diseases. They bring the viruses and bacteria that they may harbor that have not emerged yet, right? Okay, transmission of communicable diseases. We already know about the agent, host, and environment. Okay, but what are some modes of transmission? Right? How does the disease, so we're talking about transmission here. What are the modes of transmission? What is the disease development? What is the disease spectrum? Is it pandemic? Is it an epidemic? Is it endemic now? How do you surveil communicable diseases? Right? You remember this? Surveillance, we have to find who, when, where, what. Right? Remember that was your analytic and descriptive analysis. Okay. So emerging infectious diseases. Okay. Good to know this about understanding this chapter. What are the most common new, well, they call it new, but emerging infection, they say emerging means in the past 2 decades. So emerging infectious diseases are those in which have actually increased in the past 2 decades, right? And have the potential to increase. They identify 4. Ebola, HIV, influenza, and West Nile. Okay, here's an excellent slide, number 9, on primary, secondary, tertiary with in relation to infectious disease. So primary, we seek to reduce the incidence of the disease by preventing it before it happens. Secondary, we aim to prevent the spread of it once it occurs. So early identification, right? We want to identify it early and try and limit the spread of it. And then tertiary, we work to reduce the complications and disabilities of a communicable infectious disease that somebody has. right? So we work to reduce complications and disabilities through treatment and rehabilitation. So they already have it. Okay, want to talk about vaccines here. Okay, vaccine preventable diseases. Okay, if you have kids, we all know about this. Okay, well, we should know about this anyway. Okay, these are all your vaccine preventable diseases. Okay, and then we have food and waterborne diseases. Salmonella is the kind of the one that comes to mind. Okay, we have vector. Shoot, can you see this? We have vector-borne diseases. Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Okay, what I need you to know is just the kinds of potential infectious diseases. Okay, so we have all of these. We have foodborne, potentially foodborne. We have vector-borne, and then we have parasitic. Okay, and then we have diseases of travelers. Okay. And then we have healthcare acquired infections, right? I always think of something in the hospital. You know, when I worked in the hospitals, we were worried about MRSA, right? Something you acquired during hospitalization or developed when you were within the hospital setting. I don't know, did it come from visitors, patients, employees? And then that was the evolution of universal precautions. Who doesn't teach about universal precautions now? Okay. Okay. The one thing I really want to hone in on this chapter is vaccines. Okay. So, well, first, here's our Healthy People 2020 that we need to cover. Objectives related to immunization and infectious diseases. Okay. What are the goals and objectives of Healthy People 2020? So again, if you get a question of what would be an objective related to immunizations and infectious diseases regarding Healthy People 2020? These are the correct answers. Anything that's not here is not a correct answer. Again, it may sound good, but it would be asking a question specific to goals and objectives of Healthy People 2020. Okay, we've already talked about the agent, the host, and the environment. Okay. But if you want a review, this chapter provides a really nice summary of, I know we covered this in the epidemiology chapter, but it's also covered here in infectious diseases. So again, a nice review of the epidemiological triangle with the agent, host, and environment. Okay. Modes of transmission. That's important to know. How are infectious diseases transmitted? What's a vertical transmission? What's a horizontal? What's a common? And what's a vector? So know those four. That's important to understanding the transmission of infectious diseases. Okay, and then it's very helpful to know what is the disease spectrum? What is the stage of the disease? Right? Is it still in a pandemic? Is it an epidemic? Or is it, we're starting to think COVID is moving from the pandemic to the endemic. What does endemic mean? It's not going to go away. It's going to have a constant presence. That's endemic. Okay, it's kind of like the flu. The flu's endemic. Right? It's not going to go away. But what can we do to lower our risk? Whether it's vaccines, flu shots, okay? And here's the list of the emerging infectious diseases that we talked about. Okay, I just need you to know about the 4 that we identified in the outline, which is your West Nile, your flu, your HIV, and your Ebola. Okay, so that would be in table 26.2. Okay. Okay. This is an excellent summary. Excellent. Okay. I want you to read through 463. I want to read through the narrative here of primary, secondary, and tertiary. Okay. This is the best summary in the book you'll find. Okay. On page 463. Now it does have the focus on infectious diseases, but that's fine. But this gives you an excellent, excellent summary. And then it goes right into the box. Okay, so the levels of prevention, the examples they give are related to infectious disease interventions. Okay. Okay, I want you to read through the vaccine section, 465. Okay. So vaccines and preventable diseases are primary essential knowledge for understanding the infectious disease, this chapter. Okay. And what do you do when parents refuse vaccines? It's all in here. What do you do if they have come from religious communities that they don't get the vaccine? Or they have, I don't know, different, what do you do if parents just have they don't want to get their kids immunized? What do you do? Okay, so I need you to read through this section. Okay, you don't need to do the routine childhood immunization schedule, but we need to read through the vaccine preventable diseases, this section. Okay, don't need you to read through immunization schedule. You just need to know what types of vector, we said foodborne, vector, vaccines, all those different categories. Okay. There's a section in your, that's really it for this chapter. I want to pull up the study guide because there's a part of the study guide that I like that talks about this chapter. Right here. Okay. This is what I want you to know about this chapter. Vaccines are one of the most effective methods of preventing and controlling communicable diseases. All right, we know that diseases such as polio, diphtheria, pertussis, measles, which previously occurred in epidemic proportions, are now controlled by routine childhood immunizations. Okay, however, they haven't been eradicated, so kids need to be immunized. Okay, and this is what I've asked you to review in the chapter. It's in the study guide too. So I want to cover briefly the next chapter, but this is what I want you to know about chapter 26. What's in the study guide here. Okay. Okay, because it also identifies which groups are at risk for not being vaccinated. Right. And so it says here that inner city kids from minority and ethnic groups are particularly at risk for incomplete immunizations. Maybe children from religious communities whose beliefs prohibit immunization, right? Or parents who have a philosophical objection are going to be at risk. right? Research is also suggesting that adolescents have lower rates of coverage than kids or adults because they do not frequently access preventative care. So this is important section here. Okay. So let's see. The last, oh, wait, I want to go into, okay. Here we go. This is the rationale in question 1. Where do you also see it? We just went through it. Where is it? It's in the study guide. Remember I said we use both PowerPoints, the book, and the study guides to develop our, or excuse me, yeah, the case studies to develop our study guides. And this is a good example of it. Okay. And then the other two rationales talk about the flu and talk about Lyme disease. So again, read your case studies that I send you. I don't just send them to you for additional reading. They have a lot of learning and meaning in them. Okay. Last chapter. You may be doing a lot of this chapter on your own. Hang on. So this chapter focuses on HIV, hepatitis, tuberculosis, and STDs. Okay, you're going to have to read through the objectives. All right. Okay, so we know that these diseases are often acquired through behavior that can be avoided. All of them. HIV, hepatitis, sexually transmitted diseases. Right? Often acquired through behaviors that can be avoided. Right? Individuals who live with these chronic infections can transmit them to others. Okay, so slide 4 starts with HIV. Okay. Gives you a history of it. Gives you transmission information. How do we surveil? How do we test for it? And how do we care for HIV patients in the community? And then slide 9 starts on STDs. Okay, the STD section in the book focuses on a bacterial STD versus a viral. Bacterial, you can do antibiotics and hopefully clear that up. But viral, what happens with a viral sexually transmitted disease? They're not curable. Okay, so I need you in the book to understand this is the only slide with sexually transmitted diseases, but gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia, are they bacterial or are they viral? How are they treated? What STDs are potentially transmitted transplacentally? What STDs are important to? Why do we screen for them at the beginning of pregnancies? What types of STDs could potentially transfer over to the baby? Hepatitis, what's A, B, and C? And then TB. Okay, so I need you to look into these 4. Okay, I want to show you real quick in the book. Hang on. Okay, Okay, here's a table 27.1. Summary of sexually transmitted diseases. Bacterial and viral. That's what I need you to know. It's important. It's very important to know with regards to STDs, what's bacterial and what's viral, because they're both treated completely different. Okay, I don't need you to know everything in these boxes, but I need you to know what's bacterial, what are the primary bacterial STDs, and what are the primary viral. Okay. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to let you review chapter 27. What we are going to go to right now with 5 minutes left is your let's see, we're going to go to your, let's go to your, I can't think, attestation. Let's go to your week 7 attestation. Okay. Let's see what the questions are. You've already done week 6 during the exam week, so thank you for doing that. Let's go through today. So, when discussing family violence and abuse, what are some signs of abuse? So just maybe throw them out there as examples.
Physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and child abuse.
Excellent. Everybody get that? Can you repeat that?
Physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and child abuse.
Correct.
Are you asking for type of abuse or are you asking for signs of abuse?
Signs. The question is, what are the signs of abuse? Okay, we just went through this. What are the 4 emerging infectious diseases? I'll start. Ebola.
HIV, AIDS,
Yep.
West Nile virus, and H1N1.
Yep. Perfect. Who said that?
Kendra.
Thanks. That was great. Awesome. And again, let's go back to question.
What were the last 2?
Oh.
Ebola, HIV, AIDS, and then the last 2? I'm sorry.
West Nile virus and H1N1.
Thank you.
And let's go back to question 1 real quick. You can answer that question 2 ways. What are the types? Which I don't know who was speaking, but who was speaking that gave us the 4 types of family violence and abuse? Okay, so we got our 4 types of abuse, but let's add, what are some signs of abuse?
Withdrawal. The
Lack
kid,
of eye contact.
Bruises.
Bruises.
yeah.
Mhm. Nonverbal. Okay. Okay, so we covered a lot today. A lot. And if you didn't read through any of this prior to coming, then your mind's probably, right? So if you have a minute, go back to your, let's see, let's do this. So let's go through this real quick. For those of you that, see, we have one minute left. Okay, community assessment and evaluation. Remember, we talked about dimensions of a community, place, people, and function. All right. So now I encourage you to go back through each section. Make sure we covered it for these 5 topics. Okay. Go back to your study guide, make sure we covered these topics. And if we did and you understand them, then okay. But if you feel like you need some more information and want to read up, then you go to the book and read that section. Okay. And then if you're still not understanding it, then you need to make an appointment with me so we can go through it. Okay. And I'd suggest you do that for this week before next week, because next week we cover 8 chapters. So get a handle on this week first. Make sure you have a good understanding of the study guide for weeks 6 and 7 before we get to week 8. Helpful? Has this been okay today? A lot of information, but has it been okay? Did you learn a lot?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And please don't ignore those study guides, case studies that I send you. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions? I need, where's Elizabeth? Is you still in here, Elizabeth? Stay in here. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Have a good rest of the week.